people didn't think the Patriots were ready for a Super Bowl appearance. It was a tired narrative for 2 weeks leading up to the game, but clearly there was some truth to it. And while the Patriots had a disadvantage in talent and were a clear underdog, there was an area that could have been an advantage for them if used correctly. Unfortunately, in this game, it was actually their downfall. What went wrong in New England? There are many fingers pointing in Drake May's direction, understandably so. But there was another poor performance from a very unlikely source, the coaching staff. And I can tell you may not believe me right now, but I'm going to go through 3 major areas of coaching that I felt the Patriots were deficient in and frankly let their team down. But if you stick around to the end, I'm also going to describe what Mike Vrabel did, especially towards the end of the game, that may have ripple effects in the NFL for years to come. Now let's get to the positives first from Patriots' perspective, because there are not many to describe. And we'll start with that defensive game plan because it was strong, especially early on. They were trying to jump routes on Sam Darnold, and they actually made him quite uncomfortable throughout this game. In fact, they actually pressured him at a higher percentage of his dropbacks than Drake May, which seems really hard to believe. It was clear that the Patriots felt they needed to make big impact plays defensively to have a chance in this game. Now to the problems, because the difference between the offense and the defense was like getting a 2-scoop ice cream cone with vanilla and peanut butter Oreo, which is actually a shit example. Everything goes well with vanilla, damn it. There are some clear offensive play calling issues from Josh McDaniels and co. that starts with the over-reliance on Drake May in the passing game. And the problem with that was that he was pressured 34% of his dropbacks, never looked comfortable either, got sacked 6 times. And so on a day where he looked like he needed a hug at various points, wasn't necessarily on New England's side, but Seattle, they were quick to give that hug. It resulted in many 3rd and longs, which unfortunately is not good for any team, let alone Seattle in that defense, because it led to some really, really impressive and exotic blitzing schemes, or at least according to New England, because they had no idea how to stop them. And getting into these 3rd and longs and not relying on their greatest strength, which was the running game in my eyes, was a huge flaw. And the numbers don't necessarily back up that the run game was effective, but the fact of the matter was they were getting some pretty serious, 6, 7, 8 yard gains on some of the runs up the middle, particularly with Stevenson, and they just stopped doing it. And so it's not necessarily trying to use the run game to be your most effective tool, but you've now completely lost the threat of any runs and play action passing that could have been hugely beneficial to Drake May in this game. It doesn't have to be that complicated. I drew a play up here. It's run the ball up the fucking gut, and they didn't do it enough. I'm gonna try and retroactively change this, and so let's see if we can get Josh McDaniel on the line here, and we can change that play call up. All right, Josh, I'm calling this play and run the ball up the middle, goddammit. Hello? Hello? Well, of course they can't hear me. I don't have a microphone, and this isn't even plugged in. Lastly, without getting too into the weeds on the play calling, not enough Travion Henderson in this game. The Patriots had no threat of long touchdowns, at least short of what we'll get to later with that Matt Collins touchdown. But even then, that's more tight, contested jump ball action. They could have really used someone that could give them that 50-plus yard run. And with Travion having 4 50-plus yard touchdowns this season, he was the juice that they needed. We didn't have any long touchdowns that offer some excitement to us in Super Bowls. And so in the comments below, think about all the Super Bowls you've ever watched. What was your favorite long, I'm talking 50-plus yard touchdown that you've seen in Super Bowl history? Now, both teams spent that last week trying to prepare for the halftime show, which was really impressive preparation in my eyes. They would spend 14, 15 minutes in the locker room trying to get cold after a workout, trying to simulate the long halftime performance. So 14, 15 minutes of blaring Bad Bunny. It's a good way to get your team prepared in my eyes. Unfortunately for the Patriots, I do not believe that they were ready for Lady Gaga or Ricky Martin in their performance. This guy, however, Mike Macdonald, you see how well their team was prepared? That's because this is a man that clearly jams out to Lady Gaga every day. And while a poor game plan can be damaging, it can also be forgiven and even camouflaged if you're able to take care of this next area. And a potentially larger problem for New England was the lack of adjustments, or at least the time it took to adjust in this game. There's no offensive production until desperation time in the start of the 4th quarter. And it was kind of remind me of when an employee doesn't do much work until their boss gets near them. They started airing it out more in the 4th quarter. So you had that 35-yard Matt Collins touchdown. Besides that, not a whole lot of success, but they still had more success passing it actually downfield than Seattle did. A large part of that was Christian Gonzalez playing like Superman on some of those long passes, but still, they're attempting things too little too late for New England. Additionally, they were not picking up blitzes the entire game. Some of that falls on the quarterback, some of that's on offensive line. They didn't ever seem to get a running back in the flat, even for some quick passes. Should you see the blitz? I mean, usually you see a blitz come in, you can even throw back in that direction or get someone in the flat and be able to have most of the numbers be toward the quarterback. Not sure why we didn't see that. And a huge, huge problem was that cornerback blitz from Witherspoon in particular. The timing was fantastic on those. He got at a quarterback like a speeding bullet, my God. They never figured out. New England never figured out that blitz. It killed them in the fourth quarter. That cornerback blitz from Witherspoon led to a pick six, which essentially iced the game at 29-7. Make some adjustments there, and this might be a more competitive game. Another area that really baffled me was New England not utilizing one of the bigger strengths of Drake May, and that's his legs. Now, of course, it shouldn't really come as a surprise if you watch this game that they wouldn't try and coach their strengths. But why not try and design some rollouts? I think it would have negated a few different issues. One, rollout to the right, that's going to be the strong side for a right-handed quarterback. The left side of that line is where a lot of that pressure was coming at Drake May. So roll it out, get it away from that potential pressure. Two, utilize those legs. Perhaps if there is no play downfield, he can still run and get some yardage. Defense, not a whole lot wrong, I have to say, about New England. They did a nice job, but if there was one area that kept them from getting off the field and allowing the offense to have some more time, it was setting the edge on the outside for Kenneth Walker. He was literally the MVP of this game. He was outstanding. Some of the patience he had, not to mention he was just faster at getting to the edge. So perhaps part of it really is just a talent and speed thing. New England has got to figure out a way to set that edge. They could not do it all day. They were not able to stop that outside run, and it killed them. Now, while the game plan and the lack of adjustment certainly caused many issues that we've already documented, it was this next area that was actually the most eye-opening for me as a viewer. It's the overall mentality of the team. Just a lack of urgency. It was palpable how I would have thought a team might try and go with a little more pace before the fourth quarter, mind you. I understand the fourth quarter, they started to get desperate. They had 2 turnovers that killed them, really killed any momentum they had. Even that third quarter, though, strong lack of urgency. Didn't really see much fire from the team. I think more importantly, I didn't see much desire. And I'm sure it was there, but I couldn't see it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Super Bowl is the biggest game of most of these guys' careers at this point, not to mention potentially their entire life. I think what was more mind-numbing to me was they played like a team that knew they were not talented enough to win that game, and that's conceding defeat. I have no idea how a Mike Vrabel-led team has that mindset, but one thing I did notice, if you think about all the units between offense and defense of both teams, that Seattle defense, yes, incredibly talented, maybe one of the better defenses we've seen in the 21st century. I think that's fairly safe to say. But they don't just assume the guy in front of them is going to make the tackle. They all fly after the ball. Each play, with a little bit of a desperation, ferociousness. New England didn't have that on either side of the ball. That was the difference. What I find a bit strange, Mike Vrabel, he was calm throughout this. I mean, sure, he was getting on his guys and he was showing some displeasure, let's just say, as a coach typically would. But he was stoic throughout this. And it's not a bad thing, necessarily, just a little surprising. I think Mike Vrabel's calm, stoic, even keel demeanor actually showed that he sees the bigger picture. This was a young football team. They exceeded all expectations by even making the Super Bowl. And so what he was doing throughout the game, especially in that second half in the fourth, going into the fourth quarter, limiting damage. Let's not make these guys traumatized and not even be equipped to get back to this game. To get that motivation, keep them high in spirits, especially on Drake May's part. He stayed in his ear, tried not to let him get too rattled. And there was a really great shot toward the end of that game. Drake May gets knocked down on New England's sideline, and the first person to get him up is Mike Vrabel. Gives him some words of encouragement, picks him up. That might be something down the road that we look at as, or maybe we won't look at. Maybe this is going to be an underrated part of the story, the narrative. Player and coach, complete confidence in one another, and this could be a game that propels New England and motivates them to get somewhere in the future. And this is pretty big. I'm not saying that New England's getting back to Super Bowl. This is an incredibly tough conference loaded with a ton of talented QBs. You don't need me to name them all. But I think if there's something that was proven this year, even if it wasn't so much in this game, New England's no longer looking for one of those talented quarterbacks. They've got one that is ready to get into that echelon. Not to mention they've got a young nucleus. They got plenty of cap space. I believe $60 million this offseason. This is not a sport where you get stars with that, but you can fill a roster up with some really nice upgrades, build around the edges, potentially offensive, defensive line. This is a performance where Mike Vrabel saw the bigger picture and is looking to get this team back into the Super Bowl. I appreciate you watching. It means a great deal to me. If you're looking for other content where I make dumb jokes about serious sports topics, feel free to click here. Let's see what YouTube wants to recommend for you. But again, greatly appreciate you joining me. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.